Welcome back to Old Wine Wednesday, where we are down under once again with one of the most fantastic, most bombastic, most supercalifragilistic wines on the planet, mate. And that is Penfolds Grange. You probably know it. You might love it. If you don't, you should. But this one ain't so young. In fact, it's from one of the most legendary vintages ever at Penfolds, the 1983. This was a turbulent vintage, to say the least. There were floods. There were bushfires. There was drought. There was everything imaginable. Actually, the recipe for disaster. But because of the crazy strict sorting of the grapes, this ended up being one of the tiniest productions of Grange, but also one of the highest quality. Now let me set the table. The story of Grange is every bit as cool as the wine itself. Max Schubert was the guy in charge back then. And actually the owners of Penfolds sent him to Europe to find out how to make better fortified wines. Because back then in Australia, and actually you could almost say the same for California, no one really cared too much about still red wines. They cared about fortified wines like port styles and sherry and things like that. But while he was over in Europe, he was like, what the heck is this? When he started drinking the Bordeaux and the Riojas and things like this. So he came back to Oz with this crazy idea in his head that maybe they should be focusing on these styles of wines rather than what he set out to learn. So he set out to make a fantastic wine to compete with the greats of Europe. Of course, on the label, Grange Hermitage, right? As an homage to the Hermitage of France, because Australia realized that Syrah or Shiraz can be pretty darn good down there too. So he started making it. 1951 was the first. He gave most of it out and it met very lukewarm reception for the local critics and I guess aristocracy of the time because they had no idea what to make of it. So his owners told him, you stop this, son. Keep your eye on the prize. Make us more of that fancy port wine. And so in secret, he kept making vintages in the cellar, hidden away from the owners. Until 1960, when a bottle that made it over to a World's Fair competition in Europe ended up winning the gold medal, and the owners, reading the news, said, wait, that's our wine. What the hell? Then the cat was out of the bag. The jig was up. They realized that Max had been making this wine all along, but by that time they didn't care, because the wine got famous overnight. And so thus was Grange born. Of course, they lost the legal ability to keep calling it Hermitage, because of course, that's an appellation that kind of belongs to France, but the wine is still made today. The point is, if there was one iconic version of Shiraz, which basically set the tone for the entire nation's winemaking philosophy and drive to be world-class and realizing that they could compete with the greatest wines, this is certainly it. And all the rest to follow, whether it's a Clarendon Australis or if it's a Henschke Hill of Grace or any of those, which I absolutely adore as well. I mean, really, it's the Penfolds Grange that's the OG. So you got to give it its respect. And you got to say, if you haven't yet wrapped your chops around an old bottle of Grange, I'm telling you, brother, you haven't lived. Crikey! All of this insane tobacco and bacon fat and pepper and olive, and it's so unctuous and rich and deep. Oh, it's almost got a port winey character because of the concentration of it. And then you add on to that this nice little whack of dilly coconutty, 100% back then American oak. My God, they even had, back then this was mostly Shiraz, but they started integrating a little tiny bit of Cabernet into it sometime around this time. But I gotta say, making these videos, best job ever. If you can't find one of these yourself, come on into Sticks and Stones and just grab a glass. Until then, happy hunting, mates. We'll see you down under.